Rolling.
Hey guys, BJ on Game Day back again. You got Joshy here, no Brent, still in Canberra. We did a little snippet yesterday, but it wasn't too long, only 4 minutes. So with the aftermath of Origin last night, we thought we'd run through a few things from that. Also, early in the season, I did a pod special, basically looking at guys from each team I thought may go big over the season, or may be that point of difference for your team in Supercoach. Just thought I'd revisit that, look at who we looked at back then, whether they've come to fruition or whether they've failed so far this season. Back then we did it in alphabetical order. We'll just do the same here. For the Broncos, we had Corey Oates. Now, Corey Oates, bit of issues there obviously lately that's been televising that in the media. He does want to play in the back row wherever he ends up, whether it's at the Broncos or another club next season. He was hoping to do that this season, but due to injuries, due to whatever circumstances, he's found himself on the wing, and we saw him last night play for Queensland on the wing as well. So while he may want to play in the back row, he has been on the wing. That said, from a Supercoach point of view, started the season at 457,000. When we did this video first, he was on 8% ownership. He peaked at 522,000 and currently he sits at 477. So just an average season by Corey standards, nothing to flash. For the Bulldogs, probably one of the biggest successes for the season, although around about 4 or 5 weeks ago he caught a season-ending injury with his PCL, was Raymond Fatala-Mariner. At the time, priced at 310,000, owned by 2% of Supercoaches. That percentage increased dramatically. A lot of people had him. Funnily enough, throughout the whole season, I never had him. I never caught him at the right time, and by the time I thought about getting him in, the price rises had just taken him out of my reach. Peaked at 544,000. When he went out with the injury, he was at 460,000. For the Cowboys, this is probably one of our fails of the season. It's Jordan McLean, recruited from the Storm last year, only made 3 games of the season before his season was ended in injury due to a foot injury. So 356,000, never changed off his original price, so he's probably one we can wipe a line through. For the Dragons, we went with Paul Vaughan. Now, Paul definitely hasn't lit up the season like he did last year. Last year, his attacking stats were through the roof. This season, he's been a lot more solid, but I think that's due to the Dragons pack. We've seen them recruit James Graham and a few others. His minutes haven't been as strong, and his attack hasn't been there, but his base stats have been good. So he has dropped. I think his peak was when he started the season at 602,000. He's down to 479 as he currently stands. So a bit of an average season for Paul, not exactly the pod we were hoping for. For the Eels, we looked at Daniel Alvaro. Now, he's probably been a bit of a success, Daniel. Hasn't really smashed it out of the park, but he's definitely gone better than what we thought he would. Started the season at 406,000, peaked at 547,000, so a nice increase there for those who had him. Currently sits at 521. Another similar success story for the Knights with Herman Sasa. Herman Sasa came down from the Broncos, started the season 350,000, similar if not a better price rise than Alvaro, up to 527,000, and that's around the mark he currently sits as well. James Fisher-Harris for the Panthers was one we looked at. Now, Fisher-Harris probably had a better first half of the season than second half so far. Really peaked sort of pre that round 1 bye. Started 258,000 and peaked at 448,000. I think I had him for about the first 8 weeks of the season before I started to see a bit of a drop in figures, and I got rid of him then. A few people have still got him now. Solid player enough, but I just think he really has peaked for the Panthers this season, especially with the form of Viliame Kikau. Now, the biggest and best buy of the season has been for the Rabbits in Damien Cook. Started the season at 378,000. There was a lot of doubt whether he or Robbie Farrell have that position or whether they'd share it. From day one, he's been the 80-minute hooker unless he's played Origin. And obviously, he forced himself into that New South Wales Origin squad, arguably their best player for the whole series. And obviously, Billy Slater got that award for Man of the Series last night, but Damien Cook has a strong case to say that he was a bit robbed there. Has peaked at 731,000, and that's his current price. So over the course of the season, jumped up 350,000 in prize in cost, and that's a massive effort. For the Raiders, I went with Joe Tapine. Now, we talked about Joe Tapine, really natural footballer with a lot to learn, but we've seen over the past 6 or 8 weeks he's done exactly that. Started the season at 421,000. He's currently at his peak of 597,000. So massive last sort of 6 or 8 weeks from Joe Tapine. Unfortunately, that has been marred a little bit by 2 suspensions, the second of which he's currently serving at the moment. So once he gets back on the park, hopefully his owners will be looking at him continuing that upward trend. One of our biggest fails of the season, again, from the Roosters, Reece Robinson. I thought Reece had nailed down the starting spot. He had a couple of games earlier in the season through injury to certain players, but just didn't perform. He's found himself stuck down in reserve grade and doesn't look like he'll make it back to first grade. For the Sea Eagles, we went with Api Koroisau. Now, at the start of their season, our hooker combination was Damien Cook and Api Koroisau. I've now moved Koroisau to Cameron Smith, purely through injury, but also through lack of form. Koroisau was solid enough, but just wasn't really putting the big numbers on the park. Started the season at 515k, peaked at 550, currently at 482 despite the season-ending injury he suffered as well. But yeah, just a solid season from Api Koroisau, nothing really too flash about it. For the Sharkies, we went for Andrew Fifita. Andrew Fifita started the season at 570k, peaked at 700,000. Went through a spell there of about 6 weeks where he just went on a rampage, offloads everywhere. Has since quietened down a little bit since the rep round, but still sits at 569,000. So more than adequate. Most people have got him in their starting squad, if not in their first or second reserves on the bench for the front rows. For the Storm, we went with Josh Addo-Carr. Now, this is probably the biggest up and down season of any player in Supercoach. Started the season at 461 before he bottomed out at 311,000. He went on a run of 3 or 4 games where he turned up huge and his price rocketed to 709,000. He has since backed down to 420,000. I don't think I've ever seen an up and down season like that in Supercoach in the history of it. So performed really well for New South Wales, but his performances in Supercoach have been very, very frustrating. I haven't had him in Classic, but I've had him in Draft, and that's been hurting me a lot week to week. For the Tigers, we went with Corey Thompson. Now, Corey started the season on fire. The first 5 or 6 weeks, like the Tigers, were huge. He went massive, but has since disappeared a little bit like the Tigers' form. So it seems all the good things he was doing on the park were related to how good the Tigers were going as well, and that's since stopped a little bit. For the Titans, we went with Ryan James. Now, I thought about doing this review about 5 or 6 weeks ago. If I had done it then, it would have been a completely different story. Ryan James hadn't really done too much, was averaging sort of that 50. He's got a 5-round average, I think, of around about 90 something. So he's really picked it up in the last 5 or 6 weeks. Really unfortunate not to score a spot in that Blues squad. Matty Pryor from the Sharks obviously kept him out for round 2 of the State of Origin, and Tarek Sims got the nod over him for round 3. I do think if he can keep up the form, he may make a spot there next year, but he will have to start off the season next year a little bit better. Originally, he was owned by 3% of players. In the past few weeks, that has increased dramatically. 530,000 has seen him peak at 719,000 through the last couple of weeks. For the Warriors, we went with Solomon Akata. Not exactly a fail. Look, he's increased from 324,000 at the start of the season to a peak of 436. So he's done the right things in gone up in price, but he just hasn't really had that starring role. So yeah, there are a few of the pods we looked at the start of the season. Most of them have gone well. We've sort of hit the nail on the head. A couple of fails, but overall not too bad. We enter into the run home now. Obviously, we're round 18 this week, moving into the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season. I'm in a bit of strife with trades. 4 trades left. That said, I do have a team that I'm pretty comfortable with. Guns at over 500,000. I've got 15 in my team. I've got 7 mid-ranges from 300 to 500,000k. Now that does include players like Gareth Widdop, Tim Laffey, blokes like that. So again, considered guns in the past, they're just on a bit of a downward spiral money-wise, but I'm pretty happy with where they stand. And I've just got 3 nuffies in my team. So that's my team makeup at the moment. I'd like to have that gun range by the end of the season to use my last 4 trades to get that to 19, and hopefully a few of my other guys can kick up as well. My current rank out of the 130 odd thousand that are playing is 6,100. I peaked at around about 5,009, so that was a couple of weeks ago. It hasn't been the best season so far for me. The last few seasons I've done a little bit better. I've sort of cracked that 1 and 2,000 mark. This season just that little bit worse off. No doubt from the start of the year, for rounds 1, 2 and 3 I was sitting around that 60,000 mark. I just couldn't get going, but you know, it's really sort of kicked into gear since then, so pretty happy with that. But I thought I'd look at from round 1. From round 1 I've got 7 players that I've had since the start. Obviously with a squad of 25, we see trades come in and out every week, and I've got 7 players: Damien Cook, Jake Trbojevic, Latrell Mitchell, James Tedesco and Tom Trbojevic. Those are the 5 I've had since the start. The other 2 are Sione Katoa and Zach Lomax, who those 2 haven't really played any footy, so I can't really count them as being a part of it. I've also had Sam Burgess since the start, though I did trade him out at one point and trade him back in. Bit of late mail for the weekend. Obviously we've got a few games coming up. Cronulla and Penrith kick off the week next week, Friday night. Anthony Griffin's come out to the media today just saying that Nathan Cleary, James Maloney and Tyrone Peachey won't back up from Origin, so that'll be good for my boys the Sharkies to hopefully get a win over the Panthers, though they were without them last week and they put 36 points on the Warriors, so won't be able to take them too lightly. For the Sharks, Valentine Holmes is a little bit 50-50. Had a massive Origin series, was definitely Queensland's best player. Sasai Fiecki is on standby for him. Wade Graham also makes his return from injury from a fractured cheekbone. A little bit earlier than expected. Wayne's had a bit of a history in the past sort of 12 months. A few injuries that were never there early in his career, so I'm not too sure whether bringing him back a little bit early from that injury is the right thing to do. For Newey and Para, we're obviously seeing Mitchell Pearce is back this week. And Manu Male for Parramatta is out for the season, again with a fractured cheekbone like Wade Graham. For the Dogs and Rabbits, look, it looks like Damien Cook's going to be out. He had a massive series in Origin. Again, last night for New South Wales was the best on the park, I thought. Gagai is a maybe. Dane Gagai obviously played for Queensland. Again, had a massive game in the centres. Touch and go whether he backs up. It does look like Angus Crichton will back up from being on the bench for the Blues though. For the Sea Eagles and Storm, now both the Turbo brothers are named. Look, the Sea Eagles are in desperate state, so they need them to back up. Whether they will or not, I'm not too sure if they've taken any niggling injuries out of the Origin game. For the Storm, all of those guys, we just got to wait and see. They've got 6 players backing up. Craig Bellamy hasn't announced anything yet, although he does have a history of obviously resting players. My tip would be that blokes like Cameron Munster and Felice Kafusi will sit out the week. For the Raiders and Cowboys, obviously we mentioned earlier, Joe Tapine suspended at the moment, so we won't see him this week. Jack Whiten's got 6 weeks out, obviously from the assault charges, and the NRL are looking at talking to the Canberra Raiders to extend that suspension. Joshy Papali, obviously a great Origin series for him for Queensland. I reckon when he was their best forward on the park last night, he looks like he'll back up for the Raiders. For the Cowboys, Cohen Hess looks like he'll back up. Didn't play too many minutes off the bench. Gavin Cooper had a little bit of a struggle, but massive night for him. I think he's probably 50-50 at this stage as well. For the Broncos and Warriors, again, the Broncos probably just Wayne Bennett holding his cards close to his chest. Won't announce just yet who'll back up or who won't, so we'll just wait and see for that one. Whereas the Warriors are expected to be 1-17. For the Dragons, again, they're going to be assessed on Sunday. For teams like the Roosters, Boyd Cordner and Dylan Nupper have already been ruled out. Latrell Mitchell and James Tedesco to be determined. So we'll wait and see for those guys come Sunday. Obviously, they've got a couple of extra days, compared to all the other Origin players who've got to play Friday and Saturday. So we'll wait and see for that one. But that's it, guys. Just a bit of a recap, obviously, on the pod round. Catch us all next week. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we'll be back in Canberra next week with Brent doing everything as usual. Thanks, guys.